so they can catch up.
Yeah, I'm absolutely humbled at for getting any attention at all. So thank you for being here. I've been a commercial director here in Dallas for about 20 years. In fact, this is the 20th anniversary this week of the production company I have here. And so it's been, one of my goals to sort of stay in Texas and work in Texas. And I was repped in LA for a period of time in the early 90s. And I just wanted to come back and make a life here for myself and my family. And I'm an only child, an only grandchild, so it just made sense. But and I've always wanted to do feature films here and to do independent films. Joe Camp, who did Benji, if you remember,
yes,
was from here, and I used to edit at his facility. I'd do PSAs, and he would come in at night, and he'd tell me stories about screenwriting, and he'd say, Norry, you have to have a story from the Bible if you're going to have a good movie. And I said, Joe, what story did Benji come from the Bible? So he never answered. But for Chasing Shakespeare, it's very true. It's about reincarnation and faith in something that you can't see or believe in. So it's very much very spiritual and very in keeping with some of Joe's lessons that I learned 25 plus years ago. I was under contract to do a film, an independent film, not an independent film, a studio film. And the writer on the film and I became quick friends, and he's a very young Native American writer, extremely talented. His upbringing was really rough, and he was on the road with his mom in a station wagon, sort of running from the law. And I sort of forged him as a storyteller, and he became really an amazing, almost genius-like storyteller. He can write incredibly quickly. And so during, while we were having to rewrite the screenplay that we were working on at Universal, he gave me this screenplay as a gift. And I get emotional when I think about it, when I read it the first time, because it's so powerful. And I let my wife read it. And we were, I was about 6 rows back in the airplane, and I saw her shoulders shake, and I was like, okay, we're on to something. So I went to Valerie McCaffrey, who's a fantastic casting director in LA, and we started trying to put it together. And she says, who do you see as the lead? And I said, only one person, it has to be Danny Glover. And she laughed. She's like, no first-time filmmaker gets their star that they want. And I'm like, okay, well, send it to Danny. And Danny read it and loved it. So he had the same emotional takeaway that I did. So we put it together, and wound up getting the cast put together pretty quickly and shot it in 2011. Danny had done a film in Texas called Places in the Heart in 1983, where Sally Field won the Oscar that year, and arguably Danny deserved an Oscar too. His performance was so good. It was his first big break, and his mom had passed away as he showed up in Texas, so he couldn't be at the funeral, and he couldn't be there for her because he wanted to live out her dream, which was to become a film actor. And so he told me that he would go back to his hotel room every night and cry himself to sleep, and he never had been able to see the film, and he had this connection to that, which was 30 years ago. So the house that I wanted to put him in for this film was the same house. So when he got out of the car and he looked at me, we were both like, yeah, here we go. And he channeled that loss in his life into the character, into the film. So it was a really interesting process for all of us. And many times, he'd be doing scenes and I would want to stop because I was worried for him, and for his safety and for his sanity, but he delivered so many unbelievable scenes for us in this film. We're so proud. In fact, he dedicated it to 2 of his lost, recently deceased loved ones. So that's how the project came to us. And then, beyond just the oddity of the fact that, I was able to find this house and it had this connection, we just had a lot of things that came together on the film, unbelievably, like nights that we needed it to rain. And it rained like crazy and would stop minutes before we needed it to stop raining. And the crew, we would all just look at each other like, what the heck, right? God bless you. Including the scene at the Majestic Theater, which is all this thunderstorms and lightning happening. And that happened. We had to pull the crew off of the Majestic landing because of the electrical storm, which that night knocked out the power in our home, which was even more bizarre. So it's, I don't know, I think it's serendipity. I think when you really plan on something, that things all sort of come together for you. And I think you feel that in the film. You feel how special it is, and you feel how many people really put their art and love into the project. So.
Where did you find some of the younger talent? After you got Danny, what was the casting process like from there?
That was a tough one because we really needed to find a younger Danny. That person also had to have a chemistry with whoever our Native American actor, our female actor was for the younger Venus. And we went through a lot of different people and some, big name, more predictable names for her role, and then wound up with Chelsea Ricketts because she not only nailed the performance, but she's also Native American. She's part Native American. So for me, that had to be the case. I couldn't. That person had to be Native American in my heart, and she wound up being amazing. And who you see on screen is who she is. She's powerful. She's strong. She's witty. She's incredibly intelligent, and obviously she's beautiful. So.
What about Graham, and can you talk about the truck? What you found that cool truck?
Yeah, sure. Jeff Milburn is our car specialist here. In fact, there was a documentary about him a couple years ago at Dallas International Film Festival. He's a race car driver and really great. He got all those old 70s model cars for us, and even let us. We found out that when you start looking at 1972, you're like, oh, well, the cabs weren't checker cabs. There were these old Impalas, so we had to find these old Impalas and paint them. And so he took care of all that. And that's here. That's all. Nothing really had to come in from LA or anywhere else.
The tale that Mountain talks about when he was describing the first man and the lightning and all that, is that an actual Native American myth or?
Being that James, the writer, lived on reservations growing up, I'm quite confident that a lot of the mythology that he drew from is based in some real storytelling, but he insists that it's all fiction.
Can I say something? There are 500 Native American tribes, so it's a very general term. So, I mean, if you would sue, it would be a Lakota
Sure.
thing. It would be like saying to a European from Spain, is a Switzerland thing, a European thing. So we're very specific by tribes.
It's very true. And then in some cases, we wound up, I did some research, and my grandmother, I had a great-grandmother who was part Navajo, and so my grandmother would spend summers in East Texas, and she would always tell me these amazing stories that she had been, given, and that were Native American stories. And so some of that, like the owl, is very symbolic of death, and that's why we included that in the visuals. It wasn't in the screenplay, but it's a haunting moment.
There's a beauty and a power that is really incredible in the opening of this film, and some of the visuals with the lightning in the sky. I just was really blown away by the presentation of that. And can you talk a little bit about capturing some of the lightning effects that take place throughout the movie, but especially that opening shot of the lightning in the sky is so
Sure.
powerfully beautiful, and it's just great.
Thank you. We, when you do a film about lightning, it's like doing a film about a shark. You're like, okay, well, that film's been done. For me, I haven't seen a film that had storms done other than Poltergeist. That was the only thing we could think of. And for me, it's like, Spielbergian rule that the forces of nature and heaven are much stronger than we are. So having them as a huge character in the film was like having another actor. For me, it had to be very powerful, and so we pulled every single photograph, every piece of footage we could on every storm and storm cloud, and we pointed to things, and we came up with a solution for how that played. And it's a marriage of CGI and real photography, and things we shot. You know, it's
Yeah, because it looks real, but it also looks very otherworldly at the same time.
it needed to. You know,
Yeah.
it had to make you feel that, you know, this something's about to happen. You know,
Right.
whether it happens or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And actually, you guys won an award in South by Southwest.
We just did. On Saturday, we won the Audience Award for our title design up against Skyfall, The Avengers, 21 Jump Street, Paranorman, Weeds. I've done commercials for Weeds, and it was really fun to be in a competition against them. You know, same for Avengers. We were doing toy commercials for them last summer, but so I was honored we were in the competition. It was just really great to be there with other filmmakers, and I didn't think for a second that we'd win, but here we are. Very cool.
So what's the most challenging part from going from a commercial director to a theatrical director?
For me, it's been doing commercials. I'm made for this. This is what I was put on earth to do. I just happen to have been able and blessed to have a vast commercial career. And that's just helped me hone my skill, but it's never kept my vision away from what I really wanted to do. So there are 3 other films that I want to do in progression, and we have financing for 2 of those, and we're going to do them all here and try to keep Dallas on the radar for film. And I think we can do it. Yeah. The other thing that's liberating, you know, so many of the commercial advertising agencies would say, well, you know, 2-hour movie, that's easy. You know, what's hard is telling a story in 30 seconds. And that's not true. It's 240 times more difficult to tell a story on film. It's easy for advertising people to say that because they're not interested necessarily in doing film. But it definitely hones your skills, and you know, with commercials you have a video village that usually can have from 3 to 30 people all critiquing your shot one at a time, you know. So that was very liberating, the fact that I didn't have to look around and satisfy an advertising agency. It was really just, I had to satisfy me, and I'm kind of tough on me.
In the story, when we start to get to the scene where Venus is going through her transition and it's quite evident that she could possibly die, is it that the performance, the Shakespearean performance in the street is what saves her, or is it that William comes and saves her, or is it a correlation of both of those?
It's a great question. The truth of it is, this is her father's vision, and she's on a clock. She's on a countdown to seeing that through. And at the end of that, if she hasn't seen it through, she'll die. So the fact that he's there for her at that moment in time, at that place where she learns, you know, that she's not only going to be living the rest of her days with this amazing man, but also that she's going to be a teacher and she's going to give back what she had learned in her life, as opposed to simply being an actor, which has its own merits. She was going to help others and give the art to them. So all of that was in her father's, his vision for her. In fact, we went to the extent where we shot all that. We shot the visions. We shot her as a small child. I mean, it was a great exercise, and in the end, it was better that we not included in the film, because there's just so much more going on now there that builds in your heart, that becomes more symbolic. But you know, I think you're going to interpret a lot of that differently.
There's that wonderful scene with Danny and Graham that is kind of the stuff that makes great movies, when you have 2 really seasoned actors getting a chance to play off of one another. Was it always the intent of only having one sequence with the 2 of them? And also, were there certain things that those guys brought to that moment that maybe were not originally planned?
It was the one, you know, moment in the film that seemed the most important to me in the screenplay, and it felt like that was where the 2 powerhouses, you know, for us were going to be together. and they had, neither of them had worked together. Their only common link was Mel Gibson. They both worked with Mel. In fact, one night we're doing Rain Machines and it's cold, and poor Danny, we were supposed to wrap him at 11, and it's 2 in the morning, and you can see your breath, and he leans over and he said, Norry, he said, when I'm doing Lethal Weapon, they put hot tubs off set for Mel Gibson and I to get in.
You're like, I can run you some bath water.
Sorry. So, and they hadn't worked together, but boy, they're great.
Yeah.
They're so good.
There is a real magic that comes out of that scene, too.
Yeah. And they, I can't say enough great things about both of those guys, how well they took the part and made it their own as well.
Yeah. Did they add anything that you weren't expecting? Was there anything that just kind of blew you away?
The subtlety, I think, was what was so magical with both of them. When you see it on film, it's just, it's stunning.
Yeah.
But they stuck to the script for the most part. They both did a great job.
Yeah.
And Graham is fantastic at ad-libbing. There's a scene in Maverick where he ad-libs. The whole scene he ad-libbed with Mel